It seems that another wave of 40k miniatures is going out of production. It's a weird place to be in when Games Workshop won't even sell you the unit that you wish to field. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today we're talking about the expansion of Games Workshop's rotating range and getting rid of a whole bunch of fairly important choices for a few Xenos factions. The casualties today are amongst the Orks, Necrons, Tau and the Drukhari, the Drukhari being particularly hard hit, losing an enormous amount of models from their inventory. This is basically the extension of 40k's range rotations thing that they've come up with, which, as they've mentioned before in Warhammer Community, is Games Workshop's response to an enormous back catalogue worth of models that don't really sell that much. Presumably to slim down their logistics and make things a bit more efficient, they've been saying a fair bunch of models will be going away, probably temporarily, supposedly to return at some point in the future. I feel like the models that are selected for this are perhaps as simple as going through the models and seeing which ones sell worse than the others, and it's quite possibly also an excuse to really try and slim down the amount of fine cast resin models in their range. Perhaps a bit of a big strategic blunder for Games Workshop. They recast a whole load of their metal models in resin, but the quality just really wasn't very good, and a lot of their kits turned up warped and things, often meaning that they're having to send out a bunch of replacements. The kits that have been rotated out seem to be gone for an unspecified amount of time. They do say that none of these are gone for good, and they all will return in due time, though to be honest they could keep on saying that that's the case, and just never wind up getting round to bringing them back. It is maybe a little bit meaningless to say exactly when they would be back if they don't set any sort of time schedule for it, as I guess they could still be saying 50 years from now to future hobbyists that sure, yes, we will bring them back at some point, we just haven't quite gotten around to it yet. I feel it's perhaps most likely that some of the better known things that might be coming back might just pop up each time they have, say, a new codex released, so at least you could say buy all the Space Marine range when their codex drops, even if a lot of their miniatures remain rotated out most of the time. So far the things that have gone are a lot of relatively minor marine characters, lots of things like alternate sculpts for captains and various other HQ choices, and a bunch of perhaps the slightly lesser known special characters, though it does include a few really big names for their chapters, things like Pedro Cantor, Lysander, or Captain Artemis of the Death Watch. Maybe not the most important names in people who collect other armies' minds, but if you happen to collect Crimson Fists, then Pedro Cantor going away takes your list of named characters from 1 down to 0. The common theme seems to be that it's pretty much Firstborn going away for the Marines, and it's almost entirely fine cast stuff, but there are a few instances of some slightly new plastic kits going too, Captain Artemis being one of them, and a Terminator Librarian, though technically that's still available if you buy the Grey Knights Combat Patrol. Games Workshop does bring things back from the distant past on made-to-order bases. They've been doing that with quite a lot of classic models just as spot releases over the past few years. In recent weeks there's been things like a bunch of classic Space Marine captains like this guy on the left, or some of the old Eldar Autarchs like this chap with the swooping hawk wings on the right. Maybe a similar sort of model for this could be what we see with all of the rotated stuff. The Autarchs came back at the same time as the Eldar Codex, so I guess maybe having a release for your faction otherwise might be something that heralds bringing back a few things from the vaults of things that are rotated. In any case, they've basically given us a 2-week warning on a bunch of things that are dropping. Apparently this list of stuff is going to be on sale till the 1st of May, then going away for an unspecified amount of time. First up we have the Orks, 3 fine-cast special characters hit, Boss Snickrot, Boss Zagstrug and Captain Badrock, all arguably slightly minor Ork characters, though I'd say Boss Snickrot is the most important out of the 3 of them. He's got some really quite cool lore on Armageddon, and maybe is a little bit more tempting to play in-game than the other 2. I do quite like his model as well. It is quite a fun one. Then for Necrons we have 4 things plus some Forge World kits, again 4 Finecast HQ choices, though only taking a chunk of the fairly big Finecast Necron HQ range. Maybe some of their other Finecast models sell a little bit better perhaps, things like Imatech or Trazyn. A generic Necron Overlord is going, as is the generic Cryptech or Technomancer. The only one you can get of him is the Canoptech Cloak one now, the one in plastic. And then the generic Necron Lord, a pretty classic Necron miniature from their initial big release. Not really too bad a choice in game at the moment, although I guess maybe you could try converting one out of a Royal Warden, and maybe a similar sort of look. Finally there's the upgrade kit for the Locust Destroyer, the one that makes the Necron Destroyer Lord. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of the hybrid upgrade kits. Again, for the Destroyer Lord, maybe might not be the hardest to convert an alternative, using bits from Lichguard like the War Scythe perhaps. I guess the hardest thing to convert could be Resurrection Orbs maybe. They're not the most common thing that you get on other plastic Necron parts. Really hardest hit by quite a long way though this time are the Drukhari. As best I can tell, I think that this is their entire Finecast range, all vanishing off into the webway for the foreseeable future, though I think perhaps some of these are more annoying than others. I think Urian Rakarth is a fairly big hit, that means there's only 2 special characters left for the faction now. Then the Court of the Archon and the Beast Pack models, both of which I found really quite expensive on a model per model basis. I think if I'd been trying to assemble either one of those units, I'd probably have found some proxies or counters models or converted my own. The Razorwing Flocks are just kind of hilariously bad value, to be honest. Really quite simple little bird models, and for some reason Games Workshop thinks it's an appropriate price to charge £13 or $20 for a single base of these, meaning that even for a tiny base unit of 3 of these that only cost 36 points in game, you're going to be paying £39 or over $60, 3 bases of fiddly resin birds for more than an intercessor squad costs. Of all things, I'm really not too surprised that these guys don't sell that well. I'd say the Beastmaster is probably less of a loss. I think that you can make a much better looking one just from converting them from Helions anyway. Then we have the Grotesques. Games Workshop only made one Finecast model of these, and again this was a really popular one for Drukhari players to proxy. I think the most common conversion I often saw was making Skaven Storm Fiends into them. They look kind of similar, a big muscly mutated body, hooked up to some funky technology. A head swap and add on a few more Drukhari parts, and they really look the bill. Finally, Mandrakes are going away as well. Again, pretty surprising just to flat out remove a unit from the codex. Going to be pretty weird for people who want to field this choice and then realise that Games Workshop doesn't sell it most of the time. Admittedly though, these guys did have a bit of a problem with the Finecast kit. Those very thin, fragile blades often looked a bit warped and weird. And again, with the price of Finecast wasn't the worst one to convert out of some various fantasy elf bits. They don't exactly look all that futuristic. Overall, I think it's still probably not all that helpful to have nothing on offer for the Drukhari players who want these units, but in terms of what they were and what Games Workshop was charging for them, most of them were really quite bad deals already, I think. I'd say perhaps that Urian Rakarth and the Mandrakes are the 2 biggest losses. The others could just really do with a bit of a new plastic resculpt and then packaging all in the same box for a same price rather than selling individually for extortionate amounts. Next up for Tau, one of the more recent codexes, Ornvar and Ornshi are both going away, as are the Farsight Enclave shoulder pads and the Tidewall gun rig. I'm maybe just a little bit surprised to see the 2 ethereal characters go away. They're both really quite strong in game at the moment, and with a new and powerful Tau book just out, I sort of felt like they might have been selling a little bit better. I guess the Farsight shoulder pads are mainly an aesthetic thing, though the Tidewall gun rig is maybe a slight bit of a surprise. It is a multi-part plastic kit, and it's a bit weird that that would go away when the shield wall and the drone port both remain, particularly as it's arguably one of the most exciting bits as it's got a massive great big railgun on it. I think out of these, probably Ornvar is the most annoying one to go away. It's really quite good in the new book. I could certainly imagine new Tau players being tempted to pick him up. It's a pretty solid alternative to a standard ethereal in-game, with his powerful invocations and being fairly hard to remove. Certainly Tau, like the other factions mentioned today, don't get hit anywhere near as hard as Drukhari. Quite a few Finecast models do remain within their range, things like Farsight or the sniper drones for example. Finally, there's a few Forge World weapon upgrades that are going too, the Stomper Belly Gun and the Claw Arm, and the Singularity Generators for the Seraptic Heavy Constructs, and the Sentry Pylon's Death Ray for the Necrons. I imagine that these ones really were quite niche pickups, or could be vaguely unhelpful if you had your dreams set on a big Forge World model with those exact upgrades. I think as losses go, they could be worse. The Stomper upgrades are things that you could potentially kit bash, and I must admit, for the Necron guns, I think that very few people will be able to tell you the difference between Singularity Generators and Death Rays. If you're fielding a great big Seraptic Heavy Construct, then you can arm it with what guns you like and tell me which rules you're using. So that's it for the current things going away with the range rotation. They'll be away on the 1st of May, and the more things like this that get removed though, it does make it feel weirder and weirder for the game of 40k. It's just pretty strange for new players to be able to come to a game and say, I want to field Boss Snickrot for my Orks, but you can't actually buy him from Games Workshop. I just can't help but think for newer players it's going to be a strange concept to have to explain, to say that, oh yes, they don't actually keep most of the pieces in stock all the time. He's gone away for a bit, we don't know when he's going to be back. It poses a few questions for their events as well. Are they going to enforce strict WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get? It's kind of a bit confusing to say that you can't field Boss Snickrot if you don't have the miniature, but also we don't actually sell the miniature, so you can't buy him. Just seems like a weird conversation to have with Games Workshop there. It's like, would you like me to try and find one on second hand? Or should I approach one of the third party people who make something that's similar but not the same? Or am I only allowed to convert something out of Games Workshop's other bits and pieces to make something that looks kind of similar? I think it'd be quite interesting if any of their event packs ever wind up mentioning that awkward situation. I'm just kind of interested to see which way they'd go on it. Otherwise, all these are just out in the ether until Games Workshop choose to bring them back. I guess they might pop up when their codex comes up, or they might just never come back at all unless Games Workshop eventually resculpts them in plastic, as long as that might take. It certainly looks like they're not going to be slowing down or stopping though. They're probably going to make their way through all the factions and giving them a similar treatment. We've had Space Marines and Chaos Marines so far, then the Orks, Necrons, Dark Eldar and Tau. I can't help but think that Guards, Tyranids and Demons are all going to be on the chopping block at some stage. I feel like all of them do have some pretty ancient fine cast relics that might well get rotated. So let me know what you think of the weird situation then. Should Games Workshop be expected to keep every single one of their game pieces in stock, even if they don't sell very well? Or is it a pretty reasonable solution for things that were in fairly low demand to the community at large in general? As always, I'll be very interested to read over your thoughts. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Orks Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k stuff coming. I do tend to post stuff pretty much every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Orks Tactics does have a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.